Welcome to Inside Boxing Daily on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. Inside Boxing Daily is brought to you by the Sheridan Report. Go make sure you go check out Bobby Sheridan at Sheridan Report. Also, the Retired Boxers Foundation. I am your co-host for Inside Boxing Daily, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I want to welcome in a man who last night, 2 hours before the show, called me and said he had to take his wife out for his birthday. Jeremiah Preisser. Jeremiah, my first question is, did you forget about the birthday until that time, or did you just basically shirk your duties here and not let me know?
No, I was just slacking, man. I mean, I knew a little while. I knew a little while beforehand, but I just got lazy.
All right, we have a special guest today. We had a small debate. There was a big debate on boxing knowledge after Jeremiah posted a video that one of our guys did about a comparison between Sugar Ray Robinson and Floyd Mayweather Jr. So to bring his point of view to the show, help me welcome William Pounds. How you doing, William?
I'm doing pretty good.
All right. So, William, the Sugar Ray Robinson debate with Floyd Mayweather Jr., we'll start there. You want to go ahead and break it down on why you think Floyd was better than Sugar Ray Robinson?
Well, I would say the first thing that I think that he was better at is making adjustments. Like, okay, you can have maybe every fighter has 3 or 4 things they do really, really well. Maybe a lot of times it'd be more. But Mayweather, most of the time, would take away a few of your weapons. Like, say, for example, the Oscar De La Hoya fight. A lot of people say he was a little older, but he was still pretty good. He still was a champion at the time. And throughout the fight, early, he was landing his jab, which he's definitely known for, but what about the left hook? Like, he never really was landing it. He wasn't throwing it. He wasn't comfortable throwing it. And then eventually he stopped jabbing, and eventually he ended up getting beat. And another thing is you could look at maybe the Pacquiao fight. Like, there's certain things that Pacquiao would do, the way he would hop in and out. He would get his combinations off. And early in the fight, Mayweather did a little bit of clinching, and that broke up his rhythm. But he wouldn't let him get off his combinations. He wouldn't let him dictate the pace that he wanted to do. And the thing with Mayweather is usually if you have a weapon, it's one weapon he's going to take away. Not completely, because it's really hard to do that. But he'll take a portion of it to where it's not necessarily a strength. And one example I would use is if you watch all of the Ali and Frazier fights, like, Ali's one of my favorite fighters too. But when I look at every one of those fights, Ali never took anything away from him. He never took away the left hook. He never really did anything that properly neutralized what Frazier was doing, like, especially in the first fight. But the second fight, he was allowed to clinch a little bit more, and that slowed the pace. But the third fight, he couldn't do that. He couldn't really slow down the left hook. He couldn't keep Frazier off of him. Like, he had to throw with him. So all 3 fights always were fought at Joe Frazier's pace. And to me, when you're talking about the best can make you fight at a fast pace, at a slow pace. They can make you fight exactly how you want to fight. And to me, I mean, people call that ring generalship. Sometimes people say he's moving around, but you always want to be in a position where you can hit your opponent and they can't hit you. And the thing is, like, even when Mayweather fights taller fighters, he'll still fight his way. And a lot of fighters, you'll see them not able to do that. And I haven't seen, obviously, all of Ray Robinson's fights because some of it you just don't have footage. But the fights that I did see against guys like Gene Tunney, he wasn't able to really dictate how he wanted to fight. Not in every fight, because he lost 2 of those 4, and one was a draw, and he knocked him out the one fight. So obviously, if you win by knockout, then you obviously win. But the other 3 fights, he couldn't dictate how he wanted to fight. And he got smothered a lot. And I'm looking at Tunney, he's not the biggest puncher in the world, but he had good pressure. He was pretty flat-footed, though, so it wasn't like it was a Marciano or Frazier type of pressure. But it was things that seemed like Robinson couldn't necessarily handle. But he was so fast. He had great power, great chin, great stamina, great combinations. But when I looked at defensively, I was like, man, there's certain things that you can really hit him with. And that was back then. I'm like, okay, obviously boxing trainers, nutrition, all of that moves forward. So I'm like, okay, if there's guys that, it didn't seem like that many guys back then really jabbed to the pit of the stomach as much. So I'm like, if guys were mixing it up like now, like if Robinson's, I'm not going to say he's easy to hit because he's definitely not an easy guy to hit, but he's not really doing the slipping that Leonard would do or the slipping that Robinson would, not Robinson, but Mayweather would do, or even Duran. Duran was really good at making you slip. A lot of times you think you're hitting him and you're really just grazing him, and I didn't really see that out of Robinson. Like, to me, Robinson can beat you in a shootout. But at the same time, if you could dictate the pace, you could beat him. Now, I think the thing that might trouble a guy like Mayweather against Robinson is Mayweather's not a natural 147-pounder. He's only had maybe 11 fights at 147. And even though Robinson started at 135, he was a big guy. He's like 5'11". So that was more of a natural weight thing for him. So obviously that could benefit him the same way a fight with Spence versus Garcia could. But I think skill for skill, I think Mayweather did things better. Because there was always, like, if you look at, okay, the Judah fight, like those first 3 or 4 rounds, Judah was really using his speed really well. And he was dictating pace, and then he could have got a knockdown. I don't know if their feet tripped up or something, but wasn't ruled it down. But Mayweather really quickly adjusted, and I've seen him fight almost every style. Like, I've seen him fight lefties, seen him fight swarmers, seen him fight punchers, boxer punchers, seen him fight short, stocky guys. And I think one of the things that probably impressed me the most was the first Maidana fight, not necessarily the second one. And I was watching it, and I was like, okay, if you're 37 years old and you're a counterpuncher, the worst thing you would want to have is a guy come in and be a swarmer and just crowd you and throw 800 punches. And I'm like, I couldn't really imagine too many fighters in the history at 147 being 37 years old and being anywhere near that style, even if you're just an outboxer, to be able to handle that kind of pressure and not get hit. Because that guy was throwing a ton. Not saying that, like, Leonard or somebody like that in their palm wouldn't beat him, because they probably would beat him pretty easily. But looking at how Sugar Ray Leonard was at 38, like, he looked pretty horrible to me. So 37, I don't think he would be that much better. I'm like, man, a guy like Leonard could have probably struggled against Maidana. At least the version that was close to Leonard when he fought against Camacho. And the other thing, too, with it's hard to say with Robinson because he was fighting at middleweight at that time. But I seen that he couldn't really handle pressure fighters either. And those were pressure fighters of that particular era. And I think that's why sometimes I think with all sports, sometimes we'll take what somebody did in an older era and we'll imagine them having skills that they did not necessarily have. But, I mean, that's just a small breakdown, I guess.
All right. Jeremiah?
Okay. Is there a particular question I'm answering?
You just respond.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think I went a little too far, so it was hard to...
Yeah. To be honest, yeah, there is a lot to kind of tease out of there because it's...
The one big thing for me is De La Hoya, because De La Hoya had only won one fight in 3 or 4 years, and that was against Mayorga before he fought Floyd Mayweather.
Yeah, but I do think William is on something. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt in anybody's mind, unless you're a big Mayweather hater, that Mayweather was certainly fantastic at adjusting, to just about any style that was presented to him, and even at an advanced stage in his career. So, I mean, you have to commend him for that. But of course, again, trying to follow the many details that were kind of teased out there. But, when we refer to, Marcos Maidana, performing well against a 37-year-old Mayweather, well, I mean, by comparison, when you talk about Ray Robinson and Gene Fullmer, you kept saying Gene Tunney, but you meant Gene Fullmer.
Oh, yeah, I meant to say
it's all right. Yeah, it's quite all right. But no, so I mean, if you're comparing a 37-year-old, let's just take it on the basis of age itself. Of course, there's a lot of nuance to be had there because by the time Ray Robinson was 37, he had far more fights against Mayweather at that point. But we're also talking about a Gene Fullmer who is also in the Hall of Fame and a Marcos Maidana who will not be. And I think when you look at, even if you view the tape, Marcos Maidana is more along the lines of, he's not as raw as Mayorga is, but he is a guy who's not technically sound. He is a guy who's rough, and he is a guy that is, tumble and physically strong as well, and a pretty good puncher. But we also have to remember that even at 39 years old, you referenced Gene Fullmer's 4 fights with Sugar Ray Robinson. Well, the draw that they had was with a 39-year-old Ray Robinson, and most people had Ray Robinson winning that fight. So we're talking about a big, strong middleweight who is in the Hall of Fame, and Robinson, after hundreds, what was he, 100 and I can't remember, 144 and 4, something in that fight. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So what I'm saying is, I don't see when you look at the tape itself, I don't see a ton of difference between somebody like Maidana in terms of ability and Gene Fullmer, who proved himself a greater fighter than Maidana ever had. But also when you talk about, I think your reference is that maybe fighters of yesteryear were maybe a bit slower, a bit more ponderous. But with that many fights under Ray Robinson's belt, you actually see a greater array of styles than you do with 50 fights. I mean, the sport itself there was a higher participation rate in the sport back then, especially pre-World War II. It was just a way that guys were more likely to make their living. And then after World War II, a lot of, Italians and Irish and, certain ethnic groups, just kind of, they went to the war and then they got out of it. And so, it started to wane a little bit. But there was a time in New York City when you'd find a boxing gym on just about every corner. So it's not as if every single person that Ray Robinson fought was slow and ponderous or, tried to get you with brute strength. I mean, guys like Georgie Abrams were quick, clever boxers. Sorry here. Guys like Georgie Abrams, Olsen was a clever fighter. You talk about swarmers. Kid Gavlin was that and more, and another Hall of Famer. He had fought punchers. He'd fought crafty guys like Randy Turpin. So when you're fighting guys at that pace, Sammy Angot, who is more of a spoiler type, not necessarily a slick boxer, but he was clever, but again, more of a spoiler type. So to me, Ray Robinson, he's not going to have the plethora of southpaws that Mayweather could have, but he saw them, and he also saw, again, a wider array of styles than Floyd Mayweather did.
Well, I mean, I think it's hard to compare 200 fights to 50. But with this, like if you have 50 fights and you fight 7 southpaws, that's a good percentage to measure off of. And then when you look at each one of the southpaws, I can't remember the exact number. I remember it was Gregor. I think it was Victor Ortiz. It was Judah. Who was
Charmbe Mitchell?
Manny Pacquiao. Yeah, Charmbe Mitchell, Pacquiao, and I'm probably missing one or two. But none of those fights were really any of the close controversial fights. All of those were ones that he probably won about 8 or 9 rounds. And after maybe 8 rounds, he was like, okay, he's winning a fight. This is pretty – it wasn't like it was a Castillo or a Maidana where it was like, oh, did he really get that? Like, it was pretty clear that he had won that. And even with that style, people say that that's a style that could get through his defensive shell. And because of the angles, it does apply, but sometimes he can change to a high guard or do different things. And I think the other thing, too, with obviously Maidana's not a Hall of Famer or anything like that, but just stylistic-wise, like if you're obviously a counterpuncher, you want to keep the exact pace. You don't want this guy throwing a million punches because, again, it's harder to time it. Now, granted, typically, if he's throwing a lot, there's a lot to counter. But when they're just swarming you with a ton of punches, it can be somewhat difficult, and at 37, that could be some trouble for you, as he did give him some trouble. And I think the other thing, too, with all sports, I think the further into the future you go, the harder it is to make the Hall of Fame. Like, I think there's a lot of fighters that probably today wouldn't make – I mean, I would apply this to every sport, football, basketball. Like, say football, you can get a certain amount of receiving yards and make the Hall, but you probably have to make triple that. And the thing now is, like, you might have a Hall of Famer that has maybe 35 losses, and you'll be like, okay, this is really, really good. Now, obviously, who you fight does play a huge, huge role in it. But I think back then you'll see a lot of guys that lost to the same fighter 2 or 3 times. And I don't automatically eliminate, like, a person from any rankings if they lose to the same fighter. But I do look at you differently. Like, I would take Willie Pep, for example. Like, he was a great, great, great fighter. But I look at how he lost to Sandy Sadler 3 out of 4. I'm like, you could not beat this guy. You beat him one time, and he stopped you every other time. So there was something that he did that other fighters can look at as a blueprint and be like, I can beat him doing this. And, say somebody took the Castillo fight. Like, okay, I think I could do this. And Mayweather had a hurt shoulder, but regardless of that, okay, I think I could use this. But then he fought him again, and none of that worked. And the same thing really happened with the Maidana fight. Like, okay, this kind of worked, and then he ran it back, and it didn't work. And the thing with Ray Robinson is there's plenty of guys that fought him multiple times, and most of the people Ray Robinson got the better of. But the thing with a few fighters, like, you'd be like, okay, like Gene Foreman, you'd be like, okay, there were some things that gave Robinson trouble in each fight. And like, okay, well, he can't adjust to – it's not that he can't adjust, but he can't really completely take this fight away. Like, if you I remember seeing a little bit of footage of the Joe Louis and Schmeling fight, both of the fights. And in the first fight, Joe Louis would jab and sway his head to the right, and then Schmeling would counter jab, or he would throw his right hand over it. And he would keep countering him and kept breaking up his pace. And then he ended up stopping him in, I think, maybe the 13th round. But the second time he fought him, he completely stopped doing that, and that weakness that was there wasn't there, and he ended up stopping Schmeling in the first round. And I didn't see as much of that from Robinson. I think there was a lot of fighters that I think
the defense here is this. The first Gene Fulmer fight was in 1957. That was 17 years after he started. It was also at middleweight. Fulmer's a champion, and the thing is this. Losses really don't start to mount up here. What was he, like 125-2 at one point? I mean, the losses don't mount up until you hit 15 years into Robinson's career. Before that, this is a guy that fought, for the light heavyweight title and damn near won the thing. Before that,
that's true.
He lost to Turpin, but when you look at it, the first Turpin fight, Turpin beats him. The second fight, Robinson adjusts. It comes back and wins the fight. Before that, though, if you want to look for a loss, if you get on BoxRec, you got to scroll down for a good minute to find a loss, which would have been to Jake LaMotta in 1943.
He
beats
a
LaMotta
really
5 times after that. And the other thing is this.
True.
With Floyd Mayweather, he fought Manny Pacquiao 5 years after he should have fought him. He didn't fight Paul Williams.
True.
He didn't fight Antonio Margarito. And the thing is this. He fought Ricky Hatton at welterweight. And the thing that bothered me about that is I think junior welterweight was about as high as Ricky Hatton could go and be successful. But he skipped completely fighting Hatton at junior welterweight around 2005 or 6 to go and fight as a welterweight. So, and then he brings him up. Juan Manuel Marquez, great fighter, but he had to go from 135 to 147 with no time to prepare. There was no fight in between.
The one thing I'll say about Marquez, though, is Marquez did call Mayweather out of retirement. It's not like Mayweather called him.
Yeah, but this is the thing. I've got Ring Magazine from that time, and, Maidana called him, or not Maidana, but Marquez called him out Pacquiao called him out 6 months before that. That didn't get him out of retirement because that was dangerous. Marquez was a guy that wasn't going to carry his punch to 147.
Well, he did carry it to 147 when he fought Pacquiao, but
yeah, because steroids are a great invention. It really helped guys get stronger quick. And the pimples on his back will show you that. And if you want to talk about steroids, you're going to bring up Pacquiao, but you got to bring up Mayweather also.
Okay, well, the question is, if we're going to use that as an excuse, are we going to use that same excuse if Errol Spence beats
What was
Garcia
the excuse? I didn't use it as an excuse. This is the thing. Manny Pacquiao went to war 5 times with Marquez. I thought Marquez got the best of him. And almost all those fights, except for that 147-pounder, where all of a sudden Marquez has got pimples all over his back, and Marquez knocks him out. My other problem with Mayweather is this. If you go from 2007 in a Ricky Hatton knockout to 2017, the only stoppage that Mayweather had was against Victor Ortiz. And the problem I have with boxers today is this. We could sit there and we could say, well, they're faster, they're stronger. But you know what? The guys back then were tougher. They fought more. And the thing is this. If you bring up Sugar Ray Leonard, Sugar Ray Leonard was a dude that the perfect example is Larry Bonds. If you remember, he knocks out Larry Bonds in Syracuse, New York. I think it was right around 1981. And he is winning the fight easily. My problem here is Floyd Mayweather in a situation like that, and he showed it with Baltimore. He showed it with a lot of guys that never should have went to distance with him. He was happy to coast. Yeah. Sugar Ray Leonard ended this discussion. There was no chance to say anything about going to distance with him. Leonard was a much bigger puncher. So was Robinson. And when you talk about a complete fighter, Floyd Mayweather was a great puncher at super featherweight and lightweight. Not so much at welterweight.
Oh, yeah. Well, the one counter I will say is he did have definitely bad hands in both hands. And I think when he started to go up to around 140, 147, like his pace he did start throwing less punches. But I think he didn't throw with the same bad intentions, too, possibly for fear of injuring his hands. And I think that does.
Wait a second, though, because if he fights Sugar Ray Robinson or Sugar Ray Leonard, his hands are still going to be the same. And the thing about Sugar Ray Leonard is Sugar Ray Leonard showed in one fight that why he's the greatest fighter I've ever saw. And that was the first fight against Tommy Hearns, where he comes out boxing. Hearns outboxes him and is whipping his ass. Leonard becomes the aggressor and goes after Hearns. This is my problem with Floyd Mayweather. In that same situation, Floyd Mayweather could not turn aggressor like Leonard did and go after Thomas Hearns.
Well, I agree with that, but my issue is who's going to take that many rounds? Because the thing is, usually if you get maybe 2 or 3 rounds, he'll turn it around. Like, it's not that he'll stop you, but if you get maybe, like, we use the Judah fight as example. Like, he probably won 3 of the first 4.
Man, Zab Judah is sleeping by the 3rd round against either Sugar Ray.
No, I'm not using that to say what the other 2 would have did. But what I'm saying is, in-ring adjustments, Judah didn't win a single round after round 4.
But this is the thing.
He started.
Hold on, I don't mean to interrupt you, but Zab Judah is not a guy that could change his style. And the thing about it is this. If I'm Floyd Mayweather and I'm fighting guys that are one-dimensional and they come out and they're giving me trouble, once I change, they can't do anything about it. But if I'm Sugar Ray Leonard and I'm fighting Tommy Hearns, or I'm Sugar Ray Robinson and I'm fighting Henry Armstrong, those guys have answers. Guys like Zab Judah aren't on the same level. And I think Floyd Mayweather is an all-time great fighter. I just think when you look at the competition, I mean, you've got to go, you talk about the 20 losses or whatever, but almost all of those are after the age of 37 or 38. And the thing is this, if Floyd Mayweather was to keep fighting, and he was to go fight Errol Spence, or he was to go fight Gennady Golovkin, which he would never do, because that would be a risk. Sugar Ray Robinson went from welterweight and fought for the light heavyweight championship. Floyd Mayweather would never make that chance.
Well, the thing is, Mayweather, he did win in 5 classes. It's just since he started at 130.
He didn't. He was not the lineal champion in 5 classes, was he?
No, he was the lineal in 4. 4 to 5, he was the lineal champion.
Now, this is the problem with that, because I'm pretty sure if Sugar Ray Robinson was alive today, he would have probably started out as the junior welterweight champion, the welterweight champion, the super welterweight champion, the middleweight champion, the super middleweight champion, and probably the light heavyweight champion. I mean,
Well,
you can't say he's a 5-division champion and compare him to Robinson or Leonard, or Robinson especially, because Robinson never had that chance. And Sugar Ray Leonard went up and fought Donnie Lalonde at 168. I don't see where Floyd Mayweather got out of his comfort zone and succeeded.
Leonard technically had that as a catch fight, though. He forced him to go down to 168.
Still at 168.
So that wasn't
it's still 168.
Yeah, but that's not a 175 pound. How can you fight for a 175-pound belt?
You can't, because it's bullshit. It's bullshit. There's a 168-pound division. But the point is this. He went up, and he fought the light heavyweight champion at a catch weight at 168. Floyd Mayweather was the kind of guy that would, bring a guy up from 135 to fight him. He would take a guy and make them contract a weight of 143. I mean, Sugar Shane Mosley would have been a great win if it would have been 4 years sooner. But he wouldn't fight him 4 years sooner.
That's true. But the thing is, there's definitely footage years before where Larry Merchant asked Mosley if he wanted a Mayweather fight, and he was making all kinds of excuses about, I got a toothache and all of this, and I'm going on vacation. And I can definitely post that video. There's definitely footage of him calling him out earlier. And the thing is, remember, Mosley jumped from 135 to 147 to fight Oscar De La Hoya and beat him twice.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that that's ducking Mayweather, but if a guy's one weight division above you and he jumps 2, it's going to take you that much longer. Because the thing is, if you're going to make sense of it, why should Mayweather jump those same weight divisions? Why not get some belts at 135, get some belts at 140,
let's face this,
147?
Let's face this. Either way, I think Mosley and Mayweather would have been an epic fight at lightweight. But if you're Shane Mosley, you're jumping your ass to 147, because at that point in time, there was 10 times the amount of money to be made fighting Oscar De La Hoya.
Oh, no, I'm not backing his decision. But what I'm saying is there was a period about 2-3 years before that he could have fought Mayweather, and that's when he was saying he had a toothache. I'm not knocking him for jumping the weight to fight Oscar when he did.
Well, you know what, though? When we talked about the first Castillo fight, you brought up that Floyd had a short shoulder. I call bullshit on both of those. You know what? If you get in the ring, you're healthy enough to fight. I don't want to hear any fucking excuses.
Oh, that's true. Because, fighters come in the ring injured all the time.
And how about this? A guy like Ray Robinson who's fighting every other month, I guarantee he was banged up in probably 80% of his fights.
That's true. And, the other thing, too, is his opponents probably were banged up, too. That's the other thing. You can't just have it for him. Because if he's fighting, they probably weren't doing 200 fights, but they were probably doing about 150. So they probably, if they're not as good as he is, they're probably just as banged up, if not more. Whereas fighters now, you probably see more of their best. And that's probably something that hurts the past era, to be honest, is because you really don't see a guy that's, nobody's 100%.
But I'll tell you what, we got to get Jeremiah in here before he dozes off on us. But the one thing I'll bring up about that is fighting more often, I think, tends to make you a better fighter more than sitting 6 months and sparring. Go ahead, Jeremiah.
Well, I think there are a number of points that I think are worth addressing. So, William brought up the Sugar Shane Mosley thing and the toothache. I do think that Mosley was at welterweight at that point, and I do think he had just signed with Golden Boy. So I don't know, what exactly that was about, but the feeling at the time I thought was that Mosley, I thought he just started working with Golden Boy Promotions. And so maybe he thought that maybe a De La Hoya fight was on the horizon or something. I don't know, but obviously him and Mayweather would have been a great fight at 135. But I did want to address a few points. So we do talk about Mayweather and him being a linear/lineal champion in 4 weight classes. And I do think that's worth noting. Because he was the man at 135 by beating Castillo. He was the man at 147. And he's also gone on to beat a number of lineal middleweight champions in Miguel Cotto and Canelo Alvarez. So I think those are all commendable efforts and again, worth jotting down on the in the record book. But it's also worth pointing out that Sugar Ray Robinson actually started at 135. He started off as a lightweight, and he was actually snubbed from fighting for the lightweight championship of the world, which Sammy Angot owned at the time. So Angot was willing to meet him in a catchweight fight, I think at 138. So an over-the-pound fight without the lightweight championship at stake. So had Robinson been given his rightful shot, he would have been the lightweight champion, the welterweight champion, and the middleweight champion. And him fighting Joey Maxim at 175, there's a difference that I think is, again, worth noting, is that Robinson essentially, he started off at 135 and fought up to 175. So this is a poundage difference of 40. Mayweather started at 130 and fought as high as 154, the class. So we're talking about a guy who moved up 40 pounds on one hand, and then Mayweather who moved up 24. So we do have to acknowledge that there's some difference in that regard.
Oh yeah. Like, I think part of that difference though is Robinson was a full flushed out 5'11" guy that probably wasn't going to be able to make 135 that long, but his frame was good enough to make 170. And even when he fought at 175, he didn't weigh 170. He still was only maybe 150 something or maybe 160. So he still was giving up some weight. Whereas Mayweather, even if you look at all four of the fights at 154 against De La Hoya, Cotto, McGregor, and against Canelo, he never weighed more than 150. Like, he's always been a small guy, the same way he's not short, but I don't think he's a guy that could put on weight without, like, becoming bloated. And I always found it strange that every time they had to weigh in, it would say 150. And then even in the Canelo fight, when they had the unofficial weigh-in at the night of the fight, he was like 149, and Canelo was about 160. And I'm like, man, like, how did he lose a pound? So I think that's why he couldn't make 160, because obviously he'd be giving up 10 pounds at the weigh-in, and then whatever the guy, let's just say somebody like Triple G, let's just say he only gains 5 pounds. So now you're giving up 15 pounds against the hardest middleweight puncher. Whereas at least with Sugar Ray Leonard, when he fought Hagler, Leonard could make 160. Like Mayweather, that's like, when he fought Canelo, that was pretty much a 2 weight division difference, because that guy was 165. Like, Canelo really blows up. Like, Cotto wasn't too big, but he probably was still closer to 160. And then, I mean, Oscar's not too big, so it wasn't a huge advantage. But people don't really count the McGregor fight, but McGregor was 175 the night of the fight.
Oh, fuck. It's like, Conor McGregor. The guy can't even win in the UFC now.
No, I'm not saying that.
He had no skills. Hey, by the way, Dwight Braxton was a light heavyweight champ. He was 5'6". So.
I'm saying, like, but he. I bet you, I've never seen him, but I bet you he was a stocky guy.
Oh yeah.
Like, Mayweather's still a small guy, like, frame wise. Like, he doesn't really look that much bigger than Pacquiao. Like, he's taller, but like girth wise, he's not like. I think that definitely plays a role.
I think you're.
No, you go ahead.
No, I was just going to say you are right in a sense. I think if Mayweather's fighting in an 8 division setup, he might just be a lightweight for the rest of his life. I mean, I think that about 135 is maybe more of his natural weight than anything, because I don't think he had to work too hard to get down to 147. And again, that I do think that is worth noting, and I think it is a testament to Mayweather's skill. I never thought Cotto was that big. However, I do think Cotto was more of a natural welterweight as well, because he did fight Canelo at was he 153 on Fight Night when they were fighting for the middleweight championship.
Yeah. So and once again, you can't fight for the middleweight championship at 153. But go ahead.
Yeah, but again, I do.
I mean, Leonard did Sugar Ray Leonard did the same thing.
He did it at light heavyweight and made it a super middleweight. And I just don't like Canelo, so we can get that out of the way right now. Go ahead.
Now, I mean, like, the thing is, I'm a big Canelo fan. Like, but the thing is, I think I went back and watched all of his fights after I've seen the Mayweather fight. But when I first saw this guy Canelo, I was like, this guy Canelo is trash. Like, that was just my whole perception from him seeing the Mayweather fight, I'm like, this dude is horrible. Like I thought he was worse than McGregor. I'm like, this is the worst boxer I've ever seen in my life. And then I go back and see all of his fights before, and I see all of his fights afterwards. I'm like, this dude Canelo is really, really good.
My problem with him is he's
really
protected
horrible.
like nobody else.
Oh, yeah. That's as sad as it sounds. That's part of boxing. Like it's an ugly side of it, but he is protected. But I mean, he is going to fight Jacob, so I'll definitely give him credit for that. And he fought Triple. Like if he was like, to me,
he needs to fight Triple G again before Triple G gets too damn old so it can be competitive.
Yeah, to me, if he beats Jacobs and Charlo, I can't say anything about him. Like obviously, like the steroid thing, I can always use that. But if he beats Jacobs and Charlo, and maybe he beats Triple G again, I'm like, I can't really say anything about you at that point. But
I can say this: the fight with Triple G should have been 3 years ago, and it wasn't because he got his ass whooped.
Well, the thing too is with Sugar Ray Leonard, had he fought Hagler 2 years prior, I don't think he wins that fight.
No, he doesn't.
The thing with boxing is we want them to fight when we want them to fight, but realistically, we're not the ones getting in the ring. Like you do want to fight the guy when you think you can win. Like if you're at a point where you're like, I can't beat this guy, unless it's purely for money, why do you sign that contract? Michael Spinks knew he couldn't beat Mike Tyson. Larry Holmes knew he couldn't beat Mike Tyson.
Well, Larry Holmes, let's face it, if Larry Holmes would have been given time to prepare, he'd have had a chance. He wasn't given time. He was given 2 months. He needed money to build a hotel.
Oh, and Don King said, I got $5 million. Larry Holmes was like, okay, I'll get my ass for $5 million. So, I mean, on the money aspect, I understand it. But to me, if you yourself do not believe you can beat your opponent, why are you getting in the ring?
Okay, so when we go back to Sugar Ray Robinson, though, all right, and you look at Robinson, I don't see hardly any of that going on with Sugar Ray Robinson. He fought everybody.
Well,
he fought him 4 or 5 times.
He did have a Black Murderer's Row. There were fighters that pretty much all of those top guys were avoiding, like the Burleys and stuff like that. And that applies to Jack Johnson too, Joe Louis. There were definitely some tough black fighters that all had to fight each other because they weren't allowed to fight for titles. There was Sam Langfords in every weight division. And I mean, that's not fair. But Robinson was part of that category too. There were guys that he didn't fight, but by the same token, it's like they're not going to get as much mention, which definitely sucks. I think his name was Charlie Burley, something like that. I can't remember his name. But Robinson didn't go anywhere near that guy. But the thing is, like, I don't really knock you if it was like one guy that's like, okay, well, this is a dangerous black guy. And at that time, I don't think America really wanted to see 2 black champions fight because it meant that some black champion was going to have the belt. Whereas if you have a black guy and a white guy, okay, there's a chance this white guy can take the belt back.
Well, no, that makes a lot more money. But Jeremiah, you want to? Let's let Jared. I think Jeremiah knows a little bit about Charlie Burley and all that. Jeremiah.
Well, yeah, a little bit because I do know. I actually know Sugar Ray Robinson's trainer's son, so Harry Wiley Jr. And I've talked to him on the phone about the whole Charlie Burley situation. So it's actually not as if Robinson avoided everybody in the Black Murderers Row. He did fight Aaron Wade, who's widely perceived as one of those avoided black fighters, and he knocked him out in the 3rd round. But the thing about Charlie Burley is at the time there really was no push for the fight. I think this is more of a retrospect thing where we look back, and I actually think Buddy Gibbs, one of our staff writers, is writing about this. But I think it's more complex, to be honest with you, than they were just avoided. So a lot of these guys came around during World War II, and some of them were frozen out of title shots unjustly.
Oh, yeah.
But which I agree to, but also some of that was World War II. So you had a guy like Tony Zale who went into the war, and the title was essentially frozen for 3 or 4 years. So you can't expect a guy who's off, firing a gun, to defend his title against one of these guys. So that's why a lot of them, if you look at the records during the war period, you see Charlie Burley fighting Holman Williams a ton, Wade, and all these other guys, again, because they weren't available. You look at Ezer Charles and Gus Lasenovich he was off in the war effort too. So again, some of it was bad timing, some of it was avoidance. But when it comes to Robinson and some of the Black Murders Row, I actually don't think that Charlie Burley and Sugar Ray Robinson were ranked in the same weight class, except for 1 year, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's a little bit more complex, and he just avoided him. And I have talked to Harry Wiley Jr., and he said that Sugar Ray Robinson's manager actually went to Charlie Burley's hometown to see him fight, see what sort of crowd he could draw, and essentially they had a front row seat to a main event with Charlie Burley because nobody cared about him even in his hometown. And the reason being is because he was a Pittsburgh fighter. But during the time, guys like Billy Conn and others, Fritzy Zivik, were much bigger sellers because of their style and their personalities than Charlie Burley ever was. So not only was he not a big sale in his hometown, he wasn't a big sell nationally. So there just was never any, real interest for that fight itself. And
high risk, low reward, pretty much.
Yeah, and I do accept that it would have been nice to have seen it, but Robinson, as a black guy, was in a more privileged position because he was well known during the amateur days, and he got to get. I mean, he was avoided at welterweight for years. I mean, Cochran avoided him for a while, and it took a while before he even got his welterweight shot. He couldn't get the lightweight shot, so it's not as if he was privileged the entire way through. But once he became the welterweight champion, he had the luxury of fighting white guys who sold better more often. So I think there's some nuance to that.
Yeah, I fully agree. When you're the champion, it's not really that you have to fight everybody because everybody has to fight each other to get to where I agree with that. I just don't agree with the notion that Robinson fought everybody there was, because in every weight division, there's always somebody that you could have fought. Because would I knock Anthony Joshua if he doesn't fight Ortiz, or knock Fury if they don't fight him? Because I mean, obviously we would want Wilder or AJ or Fury to fight, but White might not get a fight with Fury. The same way back in the day, I don't remember if Ken Norton and Joe Frazier ever fought.
They didn't because they were friends, actually. They were best friends. Yeah, because actually I got to interview George Foreman with John Raspani, and that was the thing. They were friends. They were sparring partners, and George said that's the one guy he never would have fought, and Norton was the same way.
Yeah, and I think, what's the name, Tyson and Riddick Bowe were the same way. So sometimes you get friendships.
Well, I think the problem there was Bowe wasn't really a ranked contender until 90, 91. He got the title shot in 92. And then by the time he's the champion, Tyson's in jail. So, and then when Tyson comes out of jail, he don't want to fight Riddick Bowe. You'd rather fight Frank Bruno.
Yeah. I was just going off of an interview they had with Tyson, and they asked him why the fight didn't happen, and he said that's my best friend. I'm not saying that.
Yeah, I think it was more of a timing thing, because I think most guys, if you pay him enough money, like right now, I'd punch Jeremiah right in the face for a $100 bill.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing too. Is sometimes you have people that are friends that don't fight. It's just realistically, just maybe 10, 15 years ago, Margarito and Oscar De La Hoya never fought. But it's hard to say if one ducked the other fighter or not. Sometimes you just, not Joe Frazier, but Foreman and Larry Holmes both fought really, really long, but never fought each other. I've hardly ever seen two careers span 20 years in the same division, but neither fought. And I can't say George Foreman ducked him, and I can't say Holmes ducked him, but it's weird when you have, I think Holmes fought till he was 52, and I know Foreman was at least a good 46, 47 when he retired, and it's that's weird that you have two guys fighting that long. And sometimes I think stuff is just bad timing. People will say Mayweather didn't fight Margarito, but every time people spoke about Margarito, he had all this momentum. He would either lose to Mosley, lose to Pacquiao, lose to Cotto. I'm you can't.
Yeah, but Mayweather also made the comment that he would never fight Margarito.
Well, I can't remember when he made that comment, but I mean, a guy that's, well, I mean, looking back now, a guy that's a known cheater is kind of, I would have to see when he made that comment. Because, I mean, he definitely looks to sort of cheated versus Cotto, and he definitely got caught trying to cheat against Mosley. So,
yeah,
I mean,
but that was well before that Mayweather said he wouldn't fight him.
Well, I mean, I've seen plenty of fighters. I mean, Fury said he would never fight Anthony Joshua. Like, does that mean he's a ducker right now?
No, because he'll fight him eventually. Tyson Fury is usually on something. So, when you look at it, though, I mean, the thing that sticks out to me is still, it's not just the Margarito, but it's the Paul Williams, because I think Paul Williams is the guy out of all these guys. He was long, kind of similar to Tommy Hearns. He could punch, and Mayweather never wanted any part of Paul Williams either. And Paul Williams is nowhere near the fighter Floyd Mayweather is or was, but Paul Williams stylistically would have been the guy to give him trouble, because I don't think Mayweather ever fought a guy that was like that.
That's true. I think the one thing that hurt Williams was losing the fight to Quintana, then rematching him, then having a tune-up, and then moving up in weight. I think that loss, like, if there was ever going to be a fight, because I think Paul Williams was at a point where he was like, I can't let this loss to Quintana stick. So then you rematch him, and then you have another fight, and it's like, I mean, I think back in the day, if you lost, it didn't necessarily kill your momentum. Because in theory, when Ali lost to Preisser, and then he lost to Norton, like, if this was today's era, that might have derailed a lot of his momentum. But because it was popularity, so, okay, well, we'll let you rematch both of those guys.
Well, the thing is this, though. You talked about the Quintana fight, which is in 2008. We go to 2009, though. He beats Winky Wright. He beats Sergio Martinez. He beats Kermit Cintron. That would have been the perfect time to do that fight.
That's true. Now, I do think, even though Mayweather won a belt at 154, I don't think he ever intended on really being a full 154-pounder, hence why he only had the 4 fights. The same way I view Sugar Ray Leonard, I don't view him as a 175-pound fighter. He fought for that belt one time.
He's a welterweight. He's a welterweight. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I think if it would have took place at that weight, it could have happened. But I think when Paul Williams went up, he probably went up because he couldn't make 147 anymore. I think he was like 5'11" or 6 feet. So he probably couldn't make the weight. And I don't think Paul Williams was the guy who was going to drain himself to try to make that. Would have been a disservice to the fans. And I think that's the other thing, too, when you're moving up all these weights, trying to catch people at the right time, whether they can't make a certain weight or you move up too soon. Like, the thing with heavyweights is it's easy to pick a time. Like, really, you can't really say it was a wrong time. Like, there was no wrong time for Michael Spinks to fight Tyson. I don't think there was any period where he could have beaten him.
Well, this is the thing, though. I think this. I think the Michael Spinks of 1985 without 2 knee braces on would have had a lot better chance, because everybody I've talked to involved with that, he knew he was done because he couldn't move. And if Michael Spinks can't move, he can't beat Mike Tyson. He can't even have a chance. He basically was making a shitload of money, and he got knocked out for it, basically. But, I mean, Michael Spinks, this is the thing. If you compare Spinks and Tyson, Tyson doesn't even touch Spinks for what Spinks did in his career.
Well, that's now the thing is like, it's hard to get a fight like that to happen in 85 because Tyson was just...
No, I mean, you just said that at any point in his career you didn't think that he would be able to do it. I'm just saying that a couple years before.
Okay, you know what? I'll change it to any point where it was realistic, because I don't think they would have threw Tyson. Custom Model wasn't going to throw Tyson in there with 10 fights. Now, I think Michael Spinks might have caught a very green Tyson and potentially beat him.
Yeah, I mean, James Quintillis almost beat him, if you remember.
Yeah, like, I mean, the thing is, people use this 86-year Tyson, and if you're going, I mean, I'm not saying any of you guys are doing it, but if you're going off of that stipulation, like the Tyson of 85, I don't think was as ready, but Michael Spinks was better. So, I mean, that's the other thing, too, with fighters is it's hard to find that perfect spot where everybody's as ready as they could be. And I think that's a tough thing. Like, if you look at the Mayweather and Cotto fight, like, when they did fight, Cotto was 32, Mayweather was 35. And Cotto had the 2 losses, but one was the catch weight versus Pacquiao, I don't know how much that affected it. I think he probably still would have lost.
Well, how about this,
And then
though?
the other
If
one
a
was
fighter starts fighting at the age of 20, don't you think by the time they get to 34 or 35, you could expect some losses, especially if they're fighting a lot?
Yeah, like
Okay,
that's
so
the issue.
your argument was he lost 20 times. My argument is this. In the first 17 years of his career, he lost twice. And he won over 100 fights, and he fought the best competition. I don't think there's anybody that could have seriously challenged him that he ducked. I think with Mayweather, there were guys he could have fight that he didn't fight. So, Jeremiah?
Well, okay, so yeah, a few points here. Again, you guys are touching on a lot of topics, and it's kind of hard to follow
William
along.
keeps going all over the heavyweights. You know how I love the heavyweights.
Well,
I just can't.
Yeah, I know. William, you gotta quit dragging him that way, man. It's
all
like
right. See, I ain't
it's like a
really had
lure.
that
It's like a lure,
heavyweight.
and you're fishing, and he just
Yeah, I love
don't talk about Jerry, especially bad white ones. Don't talk
Yeah.
about Jerry Cooney or
Scott
man.
Ledoux. I mean,
Scott
shit.
Ledoux, yeah.
Yeah. Because Scott
No, but,
Ledoux,
so
that's a guy I could have beat, I think. But go ahead.
Yeah, so I actually looked it up, while I was just hanging out a bit. And so just to see, about the Ray Robinson and Black Murderers Row thing, because, again, I've got a lot of respect for the guys in the Black Murderers Row, that again, the timing was bad. I'm a big Holman Williams fan. I think he was excellent. Actually, he's been compared by some people to Mayweather because he was a guy who hit pretty well early in his career, had hand problems, had to become a pure boxer, et cetera, et cetera. Anyways, I looked at the rankings to just see, who Ray Robinson was with in the Black Murderers Row. And to be honest with you, there wasn't a single guy. Charlie Burley was at middleweight by the time Robinson got the welterweight championship. So was Holman Williams, Archie Moore. The only guy in that category who Robinson could have fought was Coco Kid. And Coco Kid was excellent too, but I think he was only ranked for 2 years at the same time Ray Robinson was. So I think a bit of that is bad timing. I also wanted to say that 15 of Ray Robinson's losses came after he was 35 years of age. So to me, it's just one of those things when you've got 100-plus fights. I mean, you've been, you're fighting from lightweight, to middleweight, to light heavyweight. You've retired once already. To me, I think it's hard to hold Ray Robinson's post-35 losses against him. But I also think it's impressive when you put it in that context, right? Mayweather, again, he had wonderful longevity. We all have to acknowledge that the performances that he was putting on at 35-plus were excellent as well. But he didn't have as much mileage on the tires. And also, we talk about the Gene Fulmer fights. And again, Ray Robinson, to most people, beat Gene Fulmer in the third fight. So Ray Robinson almost became a 6-time middleweight champion at the age of 39. Also, you look at his fights after that against Paul Pender, who was a serviceable fighter, Joey Giardelli, who eventually went into the Hall of Fame. He was only a 7-5 favorite against a 41-year-old Sugar Ray Robinson or something like that. And Giardello was also a slick boxer type, at his best, of course. And Robinson actually came on late in that fight, so we're talking about a guy without the help of PEDs. I mean, PEDs really didn't become a big thing in sports until, the 60s, 70s, 80s. So we're talking about a 40-plus-year-old Mayweather or Robinson who's coming on against a guy like Giardello at 41 years of age. So again, I think it's worth adding that sort of context there. I mean, Robinson was long past his best at that point. I know another point you had made was we don't have a lot of film for Ray Robinson at 147. I think there's about 3 fights. It's not a lot of film. I think Bobby Dykes is one of the fights. Richie is another one. So
I've got the Dykes fight, so I know that one's there. And I also know this. I've traded and collected boxing fight films forever, and I'm pretty sure there's a lot more welterweight out there that meets the eye right now, and eventually I think it'll slowly trickle out. People that have it want to get paid. So if you go back 5-6 years, 10 years? I think 10 years for sure. There was no welterweight footage at all.
And not only that, we didn't have any footage of Sam Langford. So you're onto something, Mike, where a lot of these guys who are collectors, I actually know one of them, Steve Compton, who wrote the book on Harry Greb. He's a collector himself, and I've seen him talk to people about this. You know, they're like, oh, well, you have rare fights. Why don't you release them? Because they lose value if you release them. I mean, it's wonderful as fans, you know, to want to see that sort of stuff because it's valuable information. You know, we can process it and debate like we're doing here. But it loses all value. I mean, some of these things are worth a lot of money, especially if you find a Harry Greb fight or something. You know, we know a number of his fights were filmed, but anyways, I want to keep on track with the Ray Robinson thing, but I just want to add perspective to his career. I mean, he retired, came back, ended up being a multiple-time middleweight.
If you look at his last fight, Jeremiah, he lost a decision to Joey Archer 25 years after he turned pro. Joey Archer was 44-1 going into the fight.
That's true.
I mean, so he's in his mid-40s going 10 rounds with a pretty good fighter. And what we see from Floyd is he's fighting Japanese kickboxers.
Well, that's an exhibition. I don't count that.
But this is the thing. I think it's great that he does it and gets paid. I think because boxers get screwed so much, anytime one of them can get over on something else, that's fine. But I'm just comparing it at this juncture in their career. Ray Robinson was still fighting for championships against Hall of Fame fighters. And Ray Robinson fought a lot.
That's true. Like, the thing is, like, I mean, because obviously Ali had an exhibition match. He had one where he fought that wrestler Tyson had. And, like, the ones that don't go on your record, I just look at those as kind of for a charity thing. And I don't know too many people that would have turned down a $7 million exhibition. But, I mean, Robinson, his second to last fight, the guy had 42 losses. Like, people will, and I think, 44 wins? Like, people knock the McGregor debut fight. But Robinson did have a string late in his career where he fought 3 debut fighters in a row. And the thing is, it's hard to measure how good those guys were because they might have just been 20-year-olds that just started. But the thing with McGregor is he was an amateur, and he did fight in MMA. So I think in total combat, he probably had more experience than those 3 debut fighters that Robinson fought because they might have just been 18-year-old fighters.
Yeah, but they were probably 18-year-old fighters that were probably trying to win, where McGregor and Mayweather was a setup from the beginning. And people bought it hook, line, and sinker. Well,
that's definitely true. I mean, like, I'm just saying that in defense of people saying he fought a guy who never fought. But Robinson fought a few guys. Like, usually when you're 100 fights in, you wouldn't expect somebody to fight a guy. Because, I mean, Julio Cesar Chavez did the same thing. He fought plenty of guys. I think he was 40 or 50 fights in.
Roberto Duran was doing it through his entire career. But the thing is this, he's freaking old here. He's in his 40s. He's trying to get paid. So if he beats a Rudolph Bitt, a Peter Schmidt, that leads to getting paid against Joey Archer.
Well, I mean, doesn't that apply to Mayweather, who was 40? Like, I mean, 200 million. I mean, the only difference is it was a couple digits in the money column, but it was the same thing. It was like, okay, this is just a little money fight. And the thing
I got no problem with that fight. It was an exhibition. I'm just compared it that Robinson was fighting Joey Archer when he's in his mid-40s. Joey Archer would beat the shit out of Conor McGregor.
That's true. Now, the thing is, I will say, I can't think of any fighter in any era, in any weight class, that at 38 years old was the definitive best fighter in the world. Like, Robinson was really good, but I don't think he was, if they had a pound for pound, I don't think he would have been the best fighter at 38. Like, he was really good, but I'm pretty sure there would have been other fighters that would have been ranked above him.
Yeah, but just like Mayweather wasn't the best pound-for-pound fighter when he was 38.
Well, no, he was.
He was?
Because that was right. Yeah, he was ranked number 1. That was right after the Pacquiao fight.
Oh, okay.
Like, he was ranked, because I think War was number 2, and it might have been Chocolatito or something like 3. I can't remember for sure.
Okay.
It's worth putting these things again into context because I know it can get a little bit slippery when we're talking talking about guys from different eras. So the situation with Robinson is obviously he didn't manage his money that well. He was fighting guys to get paid. So it was almost as if instead of sparring just to spar, he was getting paid sparring sessions to get, like you said, a bigger fight against a guy like Joey Archer. So there's a difference there. Mayweather has obviously, he's been able to generate, single fights of greater revenue than Robinson ever did. And that's why you see, their career paths diverging and going in different routes. That's why Robinson was fighting these bad fighters late in his career. And that's why Mayweather can come back and fight whoever he like and make a ton of money. But of course, there is a difference as well, is in that Robinson, of course, he's not going to be viewed as the best fighter of anybody at 30 years of age because he had a lot more miles on his tires than right. So I mean, Robinson had taken far more punishment up to that point. He had fought, better fighters, and Mayweather has been, say what you want about Mayweather, he's done a fantastic job of marketing himself as a more defensive minded fighter. Typically those guys don't do that well in terms of earnings, but you got to give them both their credit for what they were able to accomplish. They're just two different paths here, however.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, because you can't knock one guy who's taken a ton of fights, and at the same time, you can't knock the guy that's like, okay, maybe my hands will only allow me to get 50 fights. But I think the thing, too, that gets overlooked is sometimes people don't value title fights the same. But for him to have just 50 fights, for him to have had 26 title fights, I don't think any fighter has had that same percentage.
How many of them were actually title fights, though? I mean, for the actual championship of the world.
Well, I think all of them were either for a belt or defending his belt.
But this is the thing. There's more than one champion. I'm talking about, when is he fighting? How many of those title defenses were as the single and only champion? The lineal champion.
Obviously, okay, if he's the lineal champion in 4 to 5 divisions, I can't remember which one he wasn't. But I remember in welterweight, he never was undisputed, but he did individually win every single one of those belts. It just wasn't at the same time, because IBF was his first one. And then he had the WBC, then I think he had the WBO and the WBA when he beat Mayweather, but it was some sanctioning thing where he didn't pay the fee or something crazy like that. Ended up taking that belt. So he had each one of those belts, but just at separate points. And I think him having that retirement and then going up in weight didn't allow him to really stay and get. And I think the other thing, too, is when you're going up all those weight classes, sometimes pretty difficult to become undisputed. And I think, that's the thing, too, is, obviously when there's one fight, it's easy to become undisputed because you win the one belt and you're the man. But I think the thing is, too, when they are 3 or 4 champions, it's it's not decided in just one fight. The thing I would have wanted Mayweather to do was when he beat Pacquiao, I wanted him to go for Kell Brook and get that last belt. I don't think Kell Brook would have provided him with too much of a challenge, but just for the sake of saying I became the undisputed champion.
Well, I think the problem is this. I think the fact that, and this is no knock on you because this is most fans now, I think that the fact that we give any kind of validity to Kell Brook being a welterweight champion at that time is a bad thing. It's also a bad thing to fight Andre Berto instead. But when you look at it, there can never be more than one world champion. We just watched the Super Bowl. Now, that would be like all of a sudden now the Rams decide to play the Bears, and they're going to call them the whatever world champions.
Yeah.
It's stupid.
The regular.
Yeah. The regular champion.
I agree with that, but I think we can't knock the fighters of this era because they're not the ones that set it up like this. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, you can't knock them because they're getting screwed out of money because they have to pay sanctioning fees.
Yeah, because, look at, what was it, the Terrence Crawford fight. When he became undisputed, people acted like none of the guys that he beat at that weight division really mattered. So it was okay, I won all 4 of the belts, but they're who did you fight? But then again, if you don't get every belt, but you beat the best guys in that division, you're going to say you didn't become undisputed.
I don't
I
think they will, because
I
I think if Terrence Crawford was to beat Errol Spence, if he beats Mikey Garcia, everybody would say he's the welterweight champion. And beat Keith Thurman. But
well, and the thing is, look at the Triple G, perfect example. To me, Triple G should have went after Saunders first and seen if he could have beat him, because then he would have been undisputed. And then whatever happens with Canelo happens, because even if you lose the same way, they can say he was the undisputed champion.
Go ahead, Jeremiah.
And you could have never taken that away from Triple G at that point.
Yeah,
but because he
go ahead, finish your point.
I was saying,
no, go ahead and finish your point.
Because he went after Saunders, he blew a chance at becoming undisputed. Then Canelo fails the test. He fights Monterosian instead of defending his belt, so he gets stripped of one belt. And then he loses to Canelo, loses the other two, and now it's like, man, like you could have 4 belts, but now you have 0. And even if you wanted to become undisputed, now that road is so hard. It seems like it's actually harder to become undisputed than to just win one belt.
This is the thing. It's hard for Canelo or for Triple G to be undisputed because he got fucked out of 2 decisions. He is the middleweight champion. Go ahead, Jeremiah.
Well, I don't.
I
left you with that close note.
So,
well, I know Jeremiah wanted to say something, and we've been ignoring him most of the night. So go ahead, Jeremiah.
Well, it's because not a whole lot of this is on Ray Robinson, but so I think this brings up a good point, though, and I'd like our listeners to pay attention here. So imagine that Golovkin had won all 4 belts, okay, and imagine that Alvarez had not tested positive for PEDs, okay. So what you would have is a Golovkin who has 4 alphabet titles, but he would not be the lineal champion. So how can you? This is a problem with boxing.
Why wouldn't he be the lineal champion now? How wouldn't he be the lineal if he has every belt?
Because that's not how it works. Because you have to beat the man to be the man. So okay, right? Here it goes. So Jermaine Alvarez. So let me put it into perspective. Okay. So Jermaine Taylor beat Bernard Hopkins, who was the man, right? Okay. Kelly Pavlik beats him. He becomes the man. Sergio Martinez beats him. He becomes the man. Miguel Cotto beats Sergio Martinez. He becomes the man. Canelo Alvarez beats Cotto. He becomes the man. So that's why Canelo was the man. So this is my problem with boxing and all the alphabet titles is even if Golovkin held all 4 belts, and again, we're imagining a world where Canelo did not test positive, and even then you could still argue that he's the lineal champ if you're saying, well, you got to, the line's not broken until this or that, whatever. Anyways, you would have Golovkin with four belts, but he would not be the lineal champion. So again, this is the problem with boxing, and this is why most people, all the historians that I know, they put emphasis on who you beat rather than, how many alphabet trinkets you get in divisions and whatnot. Your quality of opposition matters more than the quantity or again, how many alphabets. Because you look at guys, there are plenty of examples of this. You look at a guy like Sven Otke, who had, 21 alphabet soup defenses of his WBO trinket, and he gets, like six decisions that, should have gone against him and whatnot. But that's my problem with, and not only that, I think, maybe we'll have a disagreement here, but I think having too many divisions and too many belts is what muddies the waters. And I don't always blame the fighters because they're just working within the framework that they're given. A lot of these guys don't know better. They're not activists. That's not what they're here for. They're prize fighters. That's what they want to do. They want to fight for the money. And so they're trying to maximize their potential. And you can't always blame them. But when we're trying to put things in a context here, right? Ray Robinson was only a 2-division champion, and he spanned 40 pounds, whereas Mayweather is a 6-division titleist, and he only spanned 24 pounds, right? That's where it just all starts to get screwed up there.
I want to add to that too, because I think Roy Jones jumped even more weight than Robinson, even though he was only a 4-division champion, because he didn't win a belt at 154, but he won at 160, I think it was 68, I think 175, and then
but he was never actually the light heavyweight champion at 175.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. But I'm saying if he had fought at 154 and had that belt, then he still would have been a 5-division champion even without the 175 belt. It's just the circumstances that he fought in didn't necessarily, but he still went up about 50 pounds though. That's what I'm saying. Like the weight.
Yeah, you're right.
And look at Pacquiao. He didn't go up as much weight as Roy Jones did, but he won 8 divisions because some of the smaller ones were 3 pounds. I think it was one.
No, he started at 106.
Like
106 to 154.
No, it couldn't have been because it was 3 more divisions than Mayweather. So Mayweather was at 130. So Pacquiao had to have been 126, 122, and 119 because he would have been like a 13, 14 division champion. If he started now. He would have had to have been much lower than that because the weights below 130 was 126. That's 6 divisions, 122, and then 119.
118.
He started at 106.
I wasn't.
He started at 106 is what Jeremiah meant, I think, right?
Yeah, I'm just saying. I'm just talking about the weight.
Those weights.
No, right.
Yeah, I agree. I fully agree with that.
But if you're talking about percentage of weight, I mean, you probably have to say that Pacquiao's probably. If you start at 106 and you end at, not quite 154, but you include that division, that's actually probably a greater percentage of his weight than maybe any of these guys.
Yeah, and the issue too is Pacquiao. He's a 8 division champion, and Roy Jones went about the same amount of weight, but he's only a 4 division champion because the higher weight classes, you're not going up 3 pounds, you're going up like 7 pounds. Or I think 8 in some. I forget which ones you go. Yeah, from 60 to 68 is 8. And then I think 75 is around 7 or 8. So you're going up bigger jumps. Like, not saying that it's easy, but I think it's definitely a little easier to go up 3 pounds because that could just be an extra burger.
Yeah, that's why the junior classes shouldn't exist.
Well, the only issue I have with that is it's a lot harder to go a weight. Like if you're going from 135 to 147. Now the thing is, I do agree to you to a certain extent, but if you have it that way, then a guy like Marquez has no excuses. If he fights Mayweather, that's the exact weight. It shouldn't even have been a catch weight. And then the thing is, like obviously with more weight divisions, Robinson would have probably been a 5 or 6 division champion. Like obviously he wasn't allowed to fight for 135. Well, let's just say 40 existed. So he can fight for 40, he can fight for 47.
But it waters down the competition the fighters fight, correct, Jeremiah?
Well, I think some fighters can't fight healthy at certain,
Well, then they should stay at the weight they're healthy at, and then you get more competition.
Well, look at Adrian Broner. I don't think he can make 140 anymore, but he doesn't have the pop and he doesn't throw enough at 147. I think now.
Well, I think that's his own doing, though.
Yeah, that's his own.
That's
fault.
true, but I think there are other fighters that can't make a certain weight, but maybe they're too. Maybe it's harder for them to make that weight division. I think I think it depends on the situation in each fighter because some guys do blow up more.
All right, do this, Jeremiah. This is how Jeremiah explains it, and I'd love to hear this. Take the super middleweight division, and what happens if there's no super middleweight division, Jeremiah?
Right, exactly. So, and I would use other examples as well. But imagine you take 168 away. Okay, now you have Callum Smith, and you've got Ramirez, and now you have David Benavidez. This is an example I used in my Golovkin article because Golovkin is by and large perceived as fighting weak competition, but had 154 never existed, nobody would have looked at it that way. He would have had Erislandy Lara, Andrade would have been fighting there. Both Charlos would have been fighting there many years before, we get some of these guys who are moving up. If Mayweather wanted to win a title, he would have had to jump up to 160, and he would have had to fight stiffer competition, right? So, if Cotto would have had to take bigger risks to do the same. So
Cotto did. He
right, but that
at 160.
Right, you're right, but this is the thing though: is if you had no 154 and Martinez, was with the Charlos and Andrades and Golovkins and Alvarez's of the world,
that's a hell of a division.
Exactly, and this is the problem with all of these classes. Is you look at William, maybe you're a bit more familiar with the 90s era middleweights. Okay, so you had Mike McCollum. So eliminate 154, eliminate 168. Guys like Nigel Benn either have to choose to stay at 160 or go up to 175. Chris Eubank Sr. has to do the same. Mike McCollum has to do, he can't fight at 154. He has to fight at 160. Michael Nunn can't go up to 168. Roy Jones Jr. has to jump all the way to 175. Gerald McClellan has to jump all the way to 175. So what I'm saying is you increase the competitiveness in a given division if you eliminate all these extra divisions. And again, I could live with some of the extra divisions if we had one champion per, because then again, that would streamline your focus. But again, these 90s eras middleweights of Callum Bay and Nunn and Roy Jones and Hopkins and James Toney, you would have had a lot more fights if their direction was funneled into one direction instead of 12, when you had the IBF, WBA, WBC, and then you had divisions you could cut across. And there are historical examples of what you're talking about, William, where some of these guys just don't really fit into one division. Packy McFarlane is a good example where naturally he was just a 140-pounder, so he's too small for welterweights but too big for lightweights, which was at 133 at the time. So there are examples of that. But would I rather have that, or would I rather have guys hiding out in junior super divisions like Guillermo Rigondeaux, right? Imagine there's one. So Leo Santa Cruz and Carl Frampton, maybe you would agree with me that Rigondeaux was pretty much avoided, but part of that is because he has 122, there's multiple titles, and somebody like Leo Santa Cruz can just say, oh, well, forget it. There's 3 other titles I can grab, and then if I grab 3 of them or 2 of them, whatever, I could just jump up a division and grab 4 of those.
Now, I do agree to a certain extent, but I think I would apply it only to the small divisions. I wouldn't apply it to the big ones, because once you're jumping 8 pounds, then you have to jump another 8. That's a huge difference. But if you're talking about the smaller divisions where it's 3 pounds, where it's 4, because then at that point, like if you're jumping from, let's say, 112 to 116, I think 116 and 1, like those 2 divisions, that's still not 118. Okay, so that's not a lot of weight. But I think if you're jumping from 160 to 1, that's a huge amount. Because certain fighters, you're not going to get there naturally. You're going to either get bloated or you're going to put on too much muscle, lose stamina. Like, I think there's going to be issues with certain fighters not having the frames.
Yeah, but right now we've got issues with boxing dying because the best don't fight the best. And if you stick them all in the same division, you don't have that issue anymore.
Well, here's the thing. Look at fighters like Charlo. He moved up. Andre moved up. Jermell might move up at some point. Canelo moved up. I don't remember where Jacobs
Yeah, and now Canelo jumped to 168 to fight a guy who my dogs could kick the shit out of to get a belt at 168. Yeah. And now Billy Joe Saunders is going to do the same thing, and then they're both going to jump right back down to 160, and it's just, I'm tired of watching that shit.
Well, I don't have an issue with Canelo doing it because he's fighting Jacobs. Like, I knew that was a one-fight thing.
It doesn't matter because I had to sit there and watch him fight Rocky Fielding. What the hell is the sense of that?
Well, you didn't have to. You could have just not bought it or not. Like, if you knew the result, then it wasn't. I mean, the purist in you.
Hey, I already paid $9.99 for DAZN. I watch everything because that's $10. Damn it, William.
That month would have been canceled for me. I'm like, I can't do it, man. Y'all can't get
Yeah, but they had other fights around there. Like the week after, they had a fight I wanted to see. I don't remember who it was.
Oh, well, your $10 was paid for that then. Like, I mean, I understand what you're saying, though. I do agree, but I don't think Canelo's going to stay fighting at that division.
No, but he will jump up and make people think he's won another championship. And when we talk about Sugar Ray Robinson, the people forget this shit. Henry Armstrong won 3 titles, almost won. I mean, how long, Jeremiah, was Henry Armstrong the only man to win titles in 3 different weight classes? It was special. Now it's not. Now everybody does it.
Well, I think even if Robinson would have won that title, I don't think he's staying at 175. Just like Leonard wasn't going to stay at 175, just like Roy Jones. Like, I think certain fighters, they'll push themselves. Like, I think
but wait, he pushed himself to go fight Joey Maxim. not Rocky Fielding.
Well, I mean, there was only one belt holder, so
exactly.
It's not
so
like,
you didn't get the bullshit like that.
Well, the thing is, would he have fought Would he have fought a Rocky Fielding for the? I think Robinson definitely would have taken a Rocky Fielding fight.
Yeah, he would have, but you know what? He also would have fought 7 times that year, and the other 3 would have been against top 10 contenders.
Well, yeah, he would have fought Rocky Fielding and then fought Archie Moore afterwards.
Yeah,
that would have been a fill-in fight.
But he also would have fought some guys with 20 losses too. Like I think.
But that's fine because he fought 7 times. When you fight, Canelo fought twice last year. He had 1 good fight, and then he gave us shit. Now, it wasn't his fault because he's on steroids and he had to take his 6 months off, but still, we usually get 2 fights from him and that's it. He fights on the 2 Mexican holidays, and then he goes and hides in a hole.
I mean, you can knock the pace that the fighters are fighting because, I mean, that's all subjective. Some people like it, some people don't. But I think we can't just praise a fighter for taking a ton of fights because, I mean, out of the total number of fights that Robinson fought, he fought 47 guys with 20 losses.
Yeah, because he had to get paid because he wasn't making $10 million on closed circuit or pay-per-view TV. I'm not knocking guys that only fight twice in the year. But what I would like to see, if you're only going to fight twice, fight guys that are alive at least.
Well, let me say something real quick too, though. Okay, so I understand, right, that Robinson did have some filler fights, but my point of view has always been why not get paid for sparring sessions? I mean, these modern fighters will spend 12 weeks in a camp and they're not getting paid for it. They're just taking the damage. Whereas Robinson would just essentially fight a guy who was a pretty good sparring partner, beat him up, get paid a little bit, and then go into a title fight. And I understand what you're saying, William. I really do. And this is a criticism that I've heard levied at Sugar Ray Robinson a number of times. Okay, he had some filler fights like a lot of guys back in the day, but he also fought 85 guys who were ranked in the top 10 at one point in their career. He fought over 50 top 10 guys who were top 10 at the time. Okay, so this is all he fought 12 Hall of Famers. He fought them over 20 times. It's not as if all of these, right? There is some filler, sure, but there's also, the drive to fight the best. And my point about inactivity is I don't know a lot of guys who are fond of 2 fights a year, to be honest with you. I think that's why Golovkin had so much appeal early in his career because he'd go beat up 2 top 20, top 30 guys, and then he'd try to get anybody and everybody who would sign on the dotted line.
Yeah, and he was fighting a lot of tomatoes. Oh, my God.
He had no choice because there was too many divisions and they spread them out.
But that's actually why this is why there was some appeal to Golovkin because he was fighting 4 times a year. This is the thing about modern boxing and why 2 fights a year is not enough. Because when if you're trying to carry a sport and you have superstars, seeing a guy twice a year doesn't really do it for me. I can turn on football and see a guy 16 weeks in a row, right? Well, unless he gets hurt or something. My thing about this is it's best to stay in the spotlight, right? All these boxing scene pieces where you give guys snippets and you're like, oh yeah, I'll beat his ass and whatever. It doesn't substitute for your superstars being in the limelight constantly. Again, this is why guys like Golovkin, guys like Sergey Kovalev, who are fighting 3 times a year, got so much press. They were also scoring knockouts. But when you're fighting more, like Tevin Farmer is a good example. Tevin Farmer's a defensive-minded guy, but he's become a fan favorite for a lot of us because he fights a ton. He said he was going to fight 5-6 times this year. He'll hold some, alphabet trinket that I'm not high on. But when you're fighting more, you garner more attention. You attach yourself to more fans. Your personality is out there more. So to me, this 2 times a year is not good for the sport. I think fighting 3-4 times. I think it would do. I think it would do these guys a lot of good to fight 3-4 times a year.
I definitely. I think for the most, I agree 90%. Now I will say, I think with Mayweather, with his hands, I don't think it would have been a good idea for him to fight more than twice. I think that's as much as with the training camp. I think that's about as much as his hands probably could have handled because he was usually getting hand therapy and stuff like that to each fight. So I don't think he could have did 3 or 4. But the guys that don't have injuries and things of that nature, I think you definitely could get 3 or 4. And I remember, I think it was maybe 2 years ago, I remember it was a stretch where Deontay Wilder kept hurting his hand, but he was usually having about 2-3 fights a year. And I'm like, if you're injuring your hands, then obviously you can't be as active as you would want to be. But I think, like, up until the time you get the belt, you should definitely get 4 or 5 in a row.
Well, how about this? Let's put this in context. Instead of going with Sugar Ray Robinson, because that's a long time ago, let's compare this to Sugar Ray Leonard. Sugar Ray Leonard won the welterweight title in 1979. 1979, January 11th, he beat Johnny Gant, who was 44-11. He came back 1 month later, beat Fernand Marcotti. He comes back a month later and beats Daniel Gonzalez. A month later and beats Adolfo Verwet. A month later beats Marcus Geraldo, who actually fought Hagler for the middleweight title a year or 2 later. He then, a month later, fights Tony Schiavone, who was ranked. He then fights Pete Ranzani. 2 months later, he was ranked. Then he fights number 1 ranked Andy Price in September. And then he beats Wilfred Benitez for the title in November of 79. And then he comes back 3 months later and beats a top 10 contender in Davey Boy Green in what was an absolutely devastating knockout. And then he finishes 1980 fighting Roberto Duran twice. You go to 1981. This is before his injuries. He fights a top 10 Larry Bonds. He fights the super middleweight or super welterweight champion Ayub Kaluli, who was a really good fighter. He fought him in June. Now, 3 months later, he fights Tommy Hearns. 3 months after he fights Hearns, he fights Bruce Finch, who was a ranked guy. That's busy, and that's not fighting guys that are bums or guys that are not that good. And I don't think everybody should do that, but my point is this. He was probably the last worldwide huge fighter, correct? And what we are missing here is this. What are we missing? 1976 Olympics. The Olympics were huge at the time. No headgear. Everybody off that team that won a gold medal became a superstar. He then goes, and every one of the fights I just told you was nationally televised. And the only ones that were pay-per-view were the 2 Durans, and I think Kaluli was pay-per-view, and of course Hearns. So out of those 10 fights, if you just had a TV with normal TV, you saw 6 of those fights. And the problem is, when Keith Thurman fights once a year, there's no fan base, because if he comes out and looks spectacular and knocks a dude out, same thing of Errol Spence. Errol Spence should be a superstar right now if he's as good as people say. But it's hard to be a superstar when nobody sees you. They see you once last year against Carlos Ocampo.
That's true. Well, I think that's more of a boxing issue than just purely those fighters.
No, hold on, because we've had this discussion too. I grew up during this era. Both you and Jeremiah are a lot younger than me, which means 30 years from now, he can have you, Jeremiah can have you on, and I'll be dead, and it'll just be you too. But when we look at this, the thing about that is fighters demanded to fight each other. When you had Tommy Hearns and Sugar Ray Leonard, all right, it took a year and a half to get that fight done, until finally Leonard said, I want to fight, I'm fighting him, and if you don't get that fight, I'll get a different promoter. And see, the thing today is what we see is, and we had Vanis Martirosyan on last week, and Jeremiah will tell you, I mean, he told us, the boxers are just company line now. I'll fight whoever you tell me. Tyson Fury, was screaming that he wanted Wilder. Now that he's with Bob Arum, I'll do whatever.
Don't want that fight.
Yeah, he don't want that fight because he wants to fight Joshua because he already beat Wilder. So why do you want to fight somebody you already beat? I mean, Wilder won 2 or 3 rounds.
I don't agree with him having won the fight, but I definitely don't agree with him having won the fight. And I think he definitely should have been a lot more anxious for the rematch if he felt he won. But I mean,
why?
That's the whole.
Because the money to be made is with Anthony Joshua.
It is, but the thing is, if you fight him again and you beat him and you get the belts, and then you beat Joshua, then you would have there's no way they could have said you're not the lineal champion. You'd have been undisputed, and you'd have been the lineal champion. They couldn't have taken anything
I'm
away
sorry.
from you.
We're talking about Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder. We're supposed to be talking about great fighters. Both of those guys are shit. Anthony Joshua is shit.
No,
none of those three guys could have been. You know what? They're shit. Sugar Ray Robinson would have knocked the fuck out of him when he weighed 147 pounds.
Come on,
Jesus.
Come on, man.
Deontay Wilder swings like a fucking woman, and Tyson Fury doesn't throw any punches.
Come on. Let's go back to welterweight.
Yeah, we got to, because if you're going to tell me those guys can fucking fight, I grew up watching Ali, Frazier, and Foreman. These guys are bitches compared to that. Go ahead, Jeremiah.
Oh, come.
Well, they are.
Oh,
come on. You got to tell me Tyson Fury would have beat Ali or Deontay Wilder would have been able to stand in against Joe Frazier?
It's hard to say.
No, it's not. Wait a second. William, watch Deontay Wilder. He fights with his feet square most of the time. They're wide as hell. The first guy he fights sticks his head on his chest and goes after him. Joe Frazier would have fucking annihilated him.
I don't know. Because I think Joe Frazier has a lot of trouble with some bigger guys.
Who are those bigger guys? We're talking about George Foreman. Deontay Wilder weighs 214 to 220. George Foreman.
Yeah, but
Deontay Wilder would have shit his pants and ran out of the ring like that one guy did on TV last year if he just saw George Foreman.
Foreman's shorter, though.
He's 6'4".
He doesn't have the same reach.
He's 6'4".
He doesn't have the same reach that Wilder has. He doesn't have an 83-inch reach.
He's George Foreman. He will knock the fuck out of Deontay Wilder. Harold Sconiers knocked down Deontay Wilder.
Okay. Plenty of fighters have been knocked down.
Who knocked down Foreman?
Who knocked down Foreman? Oh, okay. I mean, yeah, he knocked him down, but I mean, Foreman has been knocked down plenty of times, though.
He has? By who? When were he plenty of times? Because the only two times I remember is Muhammad Ali and then Jimmy Young when he got exhausted in the 11th round in Puerto Rico.
Lyle knocked him down.
Oh, yeah. What happened? What happened then? He got up and he knocked Lyle down 4 times and knocked him out. And I'm sorry, but Ron Lyle would own Deontay Wilder's ass.
Oh, come on. No, let's just go back to welterweight. This is a whole
because Deontay Wilder, his biggest win is against a 45-year-old with bad blood pressure.
Okay, yeah.
Are you in a relation to John Einreinhofer?
No, not at all. The moment Lyle gets hit by a straight right hand, he's getting knocked out.
Oh, I know. Ron Lyle couldn't take a punch from a straight right hand like Deontay Wilder.
But
you know what? Wait a second. Bermain Stavern took his shots for 12 rounds. You're telling me Ron Lyle can't take one shot?
The Bermain took his punches for one fight, and what happened in the rematch?
In the rematch, he hadn't fought in 2 years, was completely out of fucking shape, and just wanted to get paid.
How many people went the distance with Foreman? About 6 or 7, and that's not counting the people that
You know, he fought like 70 fights.
Yeah, he lost to Jimmy Young. He went the distance. Shannon Briggs.
And Jimmy Young would beat the shit out of Wilder, and he beat Briggs' ass anyways.
Come on.
Oh, yeah, Jimmy Young. You don't know shit if you think Jimmy Young, who was one of the slickest heavyweights of all time, could not have taken care of Deontay Wilder.
Jimmy Young would have got his head knocked off by Wilder or Joshua.
Wilder never would have touched him.
Man, get out of here. Really?
Well, you know what? I'm sorry, but a 43-year-old Vladimir Klitschko put him on his ass. I'm pretty sure Jimmy Young could have smacked the shit out of him.
Oh, what? Are you talking about age?
Yeah, you brought up Joshua.
Vladimir's a great fighter. Though. He
was a great fighter. Then he became 43 years old.
Yeah, but he's not as good as his brother. I mean, yeah, he fought a great fight.
No, he's not. Vitaly would have fucked all these guys up. You're correct.
Now, if you talking about Vitaly, yeah, Vitaly was a... But then again, that's Vitaly, I would put... He's one of the fighters I think will have a shot at anybody in any era, no matter who you're talking about. But, I mean, it's hard to measure certain fighters.
Go ahead, Jeremiah.
I think, honestly, I think Leonard Lewis could beat Ali at any point in his career. I think he's just a better fighter. Style-wise, size-wise.
Oh, shit.
I think he could be... There's not a lot of fighters, I would say, could beat Ali in his prime, but... To me, Lennox Lewis definitely could.
Lennox Lewis didn't beat Ray Mercer, if you watch that fight. And the only reason Lennox Lewis beat Evander Holyfield is Evander Holyfield was old as shit. And he had trouble in the second fight with Holyfield.
Yeah, that's true, but he still beat him, though. And a lot
he
of
beat
people
him in 1999. Okay, well, fuck then. You think Holmes is better than Ali, right?
No, I didn't say Holmes.
Well, he
I didn't
beat
even
him.
mention Holmes.
He beat him.
But that was a much older guy.
Fucking
way,
exactly.
Way older.
And Evander Holyfield was 37 years old, I think, when he lost
But
to
the
Lewis.
thing is, Lewis
Ali was 38.
Lewis was older than Tyson in maybe a year.
But,
or
dude,
two
Mike
younger than
Tyson doesn't even enter into the realm of conversation with great heavyweights because he never beat any.
What? That's true, but you still got to put him in the top 10. You still
No,
have to have
why?
him like,
Do
what?
this.
Oh, come on.
Wait
No.
a second. Tell me
There-
one time. Give me one example where Mike Tyson was in trouble and he came back to win.
Well, you know what? Like, I can't disagree with that. But
Okay, then how you going to put him in the top 10?
Well, the thing is, there's other fighters that have lost that been in trouble and they couldn't get out of it either. Like,
Who?
it's hard to measure.
Who?
Okay, like, look, I'll give you a perfect example. Like, okay, Vitaly Klitschko, the only two times he was really in trouble was the shoulder injury and the
Okay,
cuts.
I'm pretty sure
But
we
other
were
than-
talking about great heavyweights. Vitaly's not a great heavyweight. He was just
What?
better than everybody else at that point.
Oh,
Who
no.
did
Oh,
Vitaly
come
Klitschko
on.
beat? Name me the great fighters or even good fighters that Vitaly beat.
He beat everybody there was to fight
Who'd he
in
beat?
that era. Like, you can't
Who'd he
blame the era. You can't blame
I'm not
the era.
blaming the era. I'm just asking who he beat.
Anybody he fought like that. See, that's the problem
Okay.
with you saying who did he beat. If there wasn't a person
Didn't
to
he
beat
fight an
and
old
he
Lennox
dominated,
Lewis? Did he win that fight?
he lost by cuts.
He
And the
lost
thing-
because he got hit in the fucking face and he started bleeding like a hog. It wasn't a headbutt.
And-
He got hit and he
But
lost.
I'm not
and
saying that.
I'm
not saying that.
I'm
Plenty of
sorry,
fighters-
but I saw
plenty
Vitaly
of fighters-
Klitschko quit against Chris Bird.
And yeah, with a jacked up shoulder, like this point, like the thing is, there are some fighters.
Ali
that
Ali
like
won
Mark-
with a broken jaw against Ken Norton. That's a
no,
little
he
different
lost
than Chris
that
Bird.
first fight. He lost that fight. That was the first fight. He lost that to Norton.
Oh, he
and
did?
a lot of people
and
feel
then
he
what
lost-
happened?
oh,
Wait a
yeah.
second. What happened the second and third time? Ali won. What happened the second
No,
time Bird
no,
fought
the
Vitaly
second-
Klitschko?
He didn't fight him a second time. He lost to his brother.
Exactly. So why didn't he fight him a second time? If he lost to him, why wouldn't he fight him again?
I don't know. I don't know why he didn't fight
But
him
Ali
the second
did.
time.
And this is the difference. Ali I
And-
saw
and-
in trouble a bunch of times and win. Mike Tyson never did that.
Ali, a lot of people feel Ali lost all three fights to Norton. There's a number of people that
All right,
feel
now
like he
you
lost
also
all three.
realize this. We talked about ages. A prime Ali is probably not 13 years into his career when he lost to Norton the first time.
That's true. But
All right,
that's not
Jeremiah,
Norton's
you want to
fault,
jump
though.
in? We got to get Jeremiah in. We're ignoring Jeremiah.
Dude, I don't even know what you guys are on. I mean, it's so far
Yeah,
away
like,
from the
see,
original
yeah,
topic.
Hey, we
Yeah,
had
he
an
went- he
hour
went
of
to
Robinson
heavyweight.
and Leonard. Shit changed.
Dude, I tried 3 times to take it back to welterweight, and then he
I know,
took
man.
it.
I'm telling you, you gotta avoid the
Can't
heavyweight
bring up
talks with him,
heavyweight.
man.
Now,
Because
this is the
No.
only thing I want to. This is the only thing I want to say about Vitaly though. Outside of those 2 losses, every other fight he was in, he dominated. There
I
was
like
no
Vitaly,
other fight
but
that he was
Vitaly
even
is
in.
not a top 10 heavyweight of all time.
How is it like he's never been knocked down? He really wasn't even losing rounds to people. Like the
Yeah.
few decisions he had was probably like he won 9 out of 12 rounds.
Well, yeah,
or
I
probably
think
10 or 11 or stopped.
yeah, I think
Like,
you're
guys
honest,
wasn't
William.
even-
I mean, a lot of people do think that Vitaly is a tough styles matchup for loads of heavyweights in the past. I agree with that. I mean, a lot of people think that. It's rare that you get a guy that size and that tough. He had nice counterpunching ability. He's more of a volume puncher. Obviously, he didn't have the punches his brother Vladimir did. But I do think there are a lot of people that agree with you that stylistically he's a tough test.
I agree too.
The problem
I
is
just, what he said Ali. But
this is where I make the distinction. Okay, Vitaly was a better heavyweight than Vladimir, but Vladimir was a greater heavyweight than Vitaly. So I distinguish between the two because Vladimir had the longer reign, right? He had far more title defenses. He was actually the
that's
man.
true.
Whereas
That's
Vitaly, he was marred by injuries and didn't quite get the competition level. So, Vladimir's win against Alexander Povetkin, I rank just about higher than anything that Vitaly did. But of course, you rate their performances head to head, right? So, Vladimir lost to Corey Sanders. Vitaly had an interesting scrap.
Destroyed Corey Sanders.
Yes, yeah, he ended up beating up Corey Sanders. He beat Sam Peter more convincingly than his brother did. But again, Vladimir had the longevity. He wasn't marred as much by injury. He was a bit younger. He could go a bit farther. Anyways, personally, I think the discussion is with the heavyweight division, there's a lot of reading into it, and there's a lot of nitpicking that you have to do to get your guys in the top 10. So I don't mind if somebody has Mike Tyson in the top 10. I can see it. But I can also see it not being that case. I mean, we do have to, like we have Ali and Lewis number 1 and number 2. Okay, we've got Larry Holmes up there, Jack Johnson, Rocky Marciano. But then once you get past the top 2, really, it's a lot of what you really like. It's like, well, do you like Jack Dempsey's impression on the sport and how he brought boxing into the mainstream and made it a reputable sport? Do you like Sonny Liston and how intimidating he was, and maybe what he could have done had Ali not been around? What about James J. Jeffries, who's often ignored, but had he not taken Jack Johnson on like he shouldn't have? I mean, we're talking about a guy who was out for years, ballooned up to 300 pounds, and had a mental breakdown before the fight. James J. Jeffries would have went down as the other undefeated heavyweight along with Rocky Marciano, and he fought something like 8 Hall of Famers in his 21 fights or something. I could be off there, but we're talking about a guy who almost fought a third of his entire career against Hall of Famers. Of course, some of them were past it, like Peter Jackson, but he had Bob Fitzsimmons and James Corbett, yada yada yada. Anyways, I think there's some discussion there.
Yeah, I think with the heavyweights, I think everybody agrees Ali and Lewis, one way or the other, are number 1 and number 2.
And then after that, it's kind of how you see fit.
I think that they're number 1 and number 2, but I think sometimes people mistake the distinction of ranking them high as saying they can beat everybody else. And I definitely disagree. I think Lewis could beat both of them with not a ton of trouble. I think Lewis could definitely
if you
beat
watched
Ali.
the Muhammad Ali of 1964-65, I don't think Lennox Lewis would have been able to slow him down.
I think his reach, I think his jab, and I think his range would have kept Ali uncomfortable. And then some of the bad habits that Ali did, I don't think you could get away with it with a taller guy. Like that swaying back stuff, when it's a guy your size or shorter, it's easier to do it. But you can't sway back like that against Lewis, because that right hand could come down the pipe. And then the thing is, even if you sway, you don't have the same reach that's going to allow you to counter the same way. And granted, Lewis doesn't have like the upper echelon chin, but Ali doesn't really have that destructive power. Like
all right.
The punches that Lewis
here is my question now. When you look at Lennox Lewis's record, he never fought anybody that was a laterally moving boxer.
That's very true.
Everybody was guys that stood right there for him to stick those hands on. Ali would have danced circles around him. Plus, you put this in 1965, it's a 15-round fight. And you may say, this is the thing, Lewis may punch harder than Ali, but the problem is this. Ali took a better punch than Lewis did.
Oh yeah. I think the problem, though, with Ali is his technical flaws are magnified when you're fighting a guy with 84 reach and has power. Because the thing is, when you have that reach and you have that height, you don't have to chase him. Foreman had about the same reach, so he had to chase him. Liston had good arm reach, but he was 6'1".
I think George Foreman had an arm reach of 82, 83 inches, and Ali had no problem there.
But he didn't utilize the jab, though. Foreman was a straightforward guy.
George Foreman had one of the greatest jabs in heavyweight boxing history.
Did he? He didn't utilize it against Ali, though, at all.
He hit Ali with everything. Ali stood in the corner and let him.
No. But he threw hooks. That's what I'm saying. He was not using his jab nearly enough. Like he really wasn't using it after the third. No, look anywhere past the third round, he was not using it.
All right, let me give you this. Knock him out. All right, I know we got to wrap it up because Jeremiah's got to go to bed. But I will leave you with this. When you talk about Muhammad Ali, this is the thing. Ali was a guy who was a slick boxer mover, correct? 1960 through 67. He came back, and he was the heavyweight champion. He was untouchable. He comes back in 1970, 71, and he becomes a completely different fighter. And for the next 8 years, he is still one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. That is a man, and this is the thing. Muhammad Ali had the ability because he beat guys with long reaches and guys that were big. Ernie Terrell was a big dude. Ernie Terrell couldn't touch him. Ernie Terrell's not Lennox Lewis. But I'm telling you this. I watched Muhammad Ali. This is a man that beat Foreman. He beat Frazier. He beat Liston. Lennox Lewis beat an old Holyfield. He beat an old Tyson. In their prime, I don't see a lot of great fighters Lewis beat. So on the outside, I'm going to go with the guy that I saw beat the better competition. Jeremiah, any final thoughts? And I'll give you your final thought to you, William. So I'm not ignoring you here. Go ahead, Jeremiah.
Yeah. I don't have any problem with the discussion. I mean, it's not as if William, seems far-fetched in his assessment there. And
I don't think so either. That's why I like talking to him. I'd have hung up on him if I didn't. You know that.
Yeah, no, that's true. No. So he doesn't seem that far-fetched in his assessment. And I know Bob Day, if he's listening, and he's happy with Williams. He's happy with Williams right now.
Lennox Lewis would definitely be in my top 10, so you know, William. And probably the top half.
Okay.
Yeah, and I've actually noticed that Lennox Lewis has moved up the ranks for a lot of people because the 90s has become, during the day it wasn't viewed that highly, but now, in retrospect, it appears quite good, especially, in the post period where you had Vladimir Klitschko and Vitali, and you didn't have a whole lot after that. And, I'm not a heavyweight guy. Mike is big on that. I'm not. I don't rank these guys. I've got, Ali and Lewis number 1 and number 2, and that's pretty much as far as I got.
You know why? Because you are young and you started watching boxing in the early 2000s. There was no reason to watch heavyweights.
Well, but you know what part of it is for me too is I don't rank heavyweights highly, partly because they're kind of stuck with their competition. So if you have a weak era, that's pretty much what you're going to be stuck with. Whereas
and most boxing eras have been weak at the heavyweight division.
Exactly. So, and my thing too is there's just a lack of mobility, not only in terms of physicality. I mean, a lot of these guys just don't move for shit. But if you're, Roberto Duran and there's nothing at lightweight for you, you can just move up, right? Some of these guys can even move back down. I think like a guy like Lomachenko, I don't think is natural lightweight. He could move back down if he wants to. I mean, there's just more fluidity in the smaller weight classes than the bigger weight classes. And I just think there's a general lack of skill once you get above 175.
I agree.
So that's why I don't rank heavyweights highly. That's why I don't rank them all time. I don't really rank anybody all time. Not because I don't want to, but there's just too much legwork for me to want to put in. But I just the debate itself, it's got to be Ali number 1, whether or not you think he's better. I do think William is onto something in that regard where he's saying, well, somebody can be greater, but there is also stylistically somebody may have your number, right? I think Joe Louis, maybe I'm wrong here, but I think he had problems with Jack Dempsey types where when they were bobbing and weaving and crouching low, he had a problem kind of figuring them out initially. Maybe I'm wrong there. Correct me if I am, but I did see the fight.
I think that was more of a problem.
Ouzkadon.
Yeah, Ouzkadon. Ouzkadon is a guy that was a veteran that fought literally everybody and usually 2 or 3 times. And he was more of a survivor anyways, if you look back at Ouzkadon. But Ouzkadon was a contender in the early 30s, and I think he was still a contender when you get to 1940. So I think Ali's number 1 because when you look at it, I think the best heavyweight eras depth-wise are 60s, 70s, 90s. And I think that the 80s were underrated, especially the early 80s with guys like Witherspoon and even Cooney, who both could fight. Ernie Shavers at the end of the 70s. And I think that people realize that. And Larry Holmes and Lennox Lewis are more appreciated decades after they fought than they were when they actually fought. William?
Okay. Yeah, that was one of the things I wanted to add, too, was that the longevity of fighters is definitely something that could be considered because, like you said, like with Vlad, he had a longer reign. Billy had injuries, and also he had a pretty successful kickboxing career too. So, I mean, it was like he was really doing, not necessarily at the same time, but he had about 34, 36, something like that, kickboxing fights and then boxed. So, and those injuries are probably what caused some of the knee injuries And then he still had a 5-year title reign, and then Vlad had the belt for about maybe I know he went about 9 years unbeaten. I can't remember how long he had the belt, but I think cumulatively is actually supposed to be the longest reign or the second longest next to Joe Louis's. And Joe Louis had a long reign, but people said he had the Bum of the Month club where it wasn't necessarily the better guy. So it's always
they all had a Bum of the
one?
Month club. And put it like this:
Yeah.
Vitaly Klitschko would have probably kicked the shit out of Jack Johnson and Jack Dempsey.
Yeah, and
I mean, he's just so damn big that it makes it rough.
The thing with Vitaly was he knew how to use his size, and he wasn't like those guys that only threw 200 punches. Like, he could throw 700, 800 punches in his youth. Like, he would get out there and be active. You can't, I always hated when people said he had boring fights. I'm like, dude threw 700 punches and
just because he was so much better. The Danny Williams fight is my favorite Vitaly fight because he beat the living hell out of him. But hey,
yeah, like that.
William, we got to wrap it up because we're about 2 hours and Jeremiah will start to doze off. But hey, thanks for coming on to the show. I appreciate the debate.
Oh, no problem.
All right. Jeremiah, we will be back tomorrow night with boxing historian Christopher Shelton to talk a little Julio Cesar Chavez versus damn.
Was that I thought it was De La Hoya Camacho.
No, Hector Camacho. I don't know. Camacho and Chavez, I think. I got hit in the head too much when I was younger. But, all right, guys, remember, you can hear all of our shows on Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher. Wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So, for William Pounds, Jeremiah Preisser, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.